Hello, everyone. I'm Eric D'Souza, and today we're continuing our series to celebrate the shortlist nominees of the Crime Writers of Canada's Award of Excellence 2022. Today we have Melissa Yee's, whose short story, Dead Man's Hands, was published in the Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine and is shortlisted for this year's Crime Writers Award of Canada's Best Short Story. So welcome, Melissa, and thank you for agreeing to do this interview. I can imagine you're a very busy person.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric, and the Crime Writers of Canada. Excited to be here.
I have to admit, I don't typically read people's authors' bios in these interviews. There's just not enough time. But you have a line that I found at Madame Mayhem's website that I couldn't resist. Melissa Yee could slice your throat and sew it back legally because she's an emergency doctor. And I always like to ask, how does your day job influence your writing?
Okay, I love that question too. It's interesting because when I went into medicine, I knew that I would enjoy saving people's lives and connecting with people in times of crisis. But I also figured I already knew I wanted to be a writer. So I knew there would be a lot of stories that would percolate in my mind, just having seen people in a crucible, including the people working in medicine.
Mhm.
So that's always, it's been inspiring. Of course, it's also very draining, especially during the pandemic, to keep it real. So it can go both ways. But on the upside, I found it really positive, just mentally stimulating. I meet the best people because it's really a helping profession. And patients on the whole tend to be cool and appreciative. And if they're unconscious, well, that's part of the job. So not to worry. And, the slicing the throat, of course, we hold off unless you really need us to. And it could be a minor thing too, just like a skin tag or something that was really bothering you.
As a crime writer, it's just a great line.
Yes, I know. Although one of the first times I used it was at, I guess, the previous time that I was nominated for the Arthur Ellis Award at the time. And the person who read it was like, I don't know. I think you would need a good reason to slice somebody's throat open. I was like, yes, but I would still slice someone's throat open. So it's not,
Sometimes there is a good reason.
yeah, exactly.
Now, I'm guessing this background helped you write your medical series, the Hope Sze series.
Yes, the Hope Sze medical thriller is basically, oh yeah, it's always a problem
There you
with the
go.
blur.
You got
Yeah.
it.
So um the fully inspired by my work, which was I did my residency in Montreal, which is different from when I did my medical school in London. So Ontario is different from Quebec. Not everybody knows that the federal government gives money to the provinces and the provinces do what they want with it. And so healthcare can be quite uneven across this country. You only have to look at how Indigenous people are struggling to get clean water and education to understand how healthcare too can be really uneven. And but for me, I was shocked going to Montreal, and I was just like, hey, all of a sudden everybody's waiting on stretchers. They're admitted, but they're still in the emergency room for days. Unfortunately, that has become more or less the norm, but it wasn't when I first started. And also just things like getting used to people reversing the wrong way on one-way streets. And that's just super common. Potholes in the road. You go to the library and the books smell like cigarette smoke. The
I'm
food,
from Montreal, so I know.
yeah, you're from Montreal. Okay, the food is amazing. Like there's so much art that I love, but hands-on, there are lots of problems. So
Mhm.
that made me think sort of subconsciously, I think, about murder. And I was like, wouldn't it be great if there was a resident doctor? So every book she's doing a different rotation and she's solving murders at the same time. Luckily, this didn't happen to me, but I felt like it could have. Like it was just really this lawless place where, I'd be running down the stairs at night, and I'm just like, oh, the wall is falling off. Like there's just like plaster on the stairs. I'm just like, go around it, just this is what happens. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So although I loved Montreal in some ways, it was a tough place too. And well, I now live in Ontario, but I still go back reasonably often pre-pandemic because there's just so much culture,
Yes.
lots of theater, lots of music. Like I would just walk around and be like, oh, this person like decorated their bike with all with a doll head, or this person painted their dead
I've seen
tree.
that bike.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the filter that Sade mentioned, that it can be a high Bohemian index for your, like, they rate cities according to their Bohemian index, and Montreal has a very high Bohemian index. And as an artistic person, I feel really at home there in that way.
Perfect. And where does Hope work? Montreal?
She works in Montreal, and it's a fictionalized version of, should I say it, St. Mary's Hospital, which is where I did my training. But I changed the name in the book.
Fair enough.
It's super subtle.
Before we go off from the physician side of you, I should mention that if you're anybody watching this is a member of Crime Writers of Canada, Melissa gave us a webinar, I think it was 2 years ago now. It was titled Medical Mysteries Mistakes 101, How to Make Sure Your Story is More Accurate Than Grey's Anatomy. And it's still on the Crime Writers of Canada's members only section. So if you'd like to see like a full hour PowerPoint presentation, everything available to you, it's still available to you. But we should talk about your short story. So knowing that you're a physician, I could think that Dead Man's Hands is literally a dead man's hand, but I don't think it is. So could you tell us about the story?
Yeah, that one was interesting. Now I would have to think of who it was, but in honor of Bill Kreider, an organization in the United States had sponsored an award, and they wanted you to take aspects of author Bill Kreider. So I looked into him. He was in Sleuthsayers, which is a blog group with me, but I wanted to know more details about his life. And I saw that he was from Texas, and he loved Dr. Pepper and stuff. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like, I wouldn't have thought of making a mystery there, although there are lots of mysteries set in Texas. And I started to, for some reason, think that I really wanted to write about a garbage collector named Richie, who's a Latinx man, a newlywed in love, but who's going to this high stakes poker game where he could lose his life. Because when I was researching, I guess that must have been Bill too, that he loved poker, because I don't know poker at all either. But I was fascinated to hear that there is this hand of poker called Dead Man's Hand. And like, it's a very specific set of cards, and it has meaning. And I was like, wow, I really want to write a story about Dead Man's Hand and how that would work, and how would you kill over a poker game. So I wanted it to be him versus the rich people who are play. So gambling is not legal in Texas, technically. Like, they have all sorts of rules, but obviously the rules don't apply so much to the people who are running things. And I guess I'll do a spoiler for my own story. They want him to play, if he loses, they want him to give his blood.
Oh,
yes.
don't tell too much.
Yeah. And there's more than that, but yes. And then if he wins, he has his own thing that he wants to do.
Oh.
I have to give credit to Timothy S. Johnston, who helped me with the poker. It was kind of interesting. I just want to add, I was in Ecuador when I was trying to write this, because a travel company, Narat, had asked me to write books in exchange for traveling the world. So I was about to go to the Galapagos, which has terrible internet connection. So I was frantically emailing Timothy and being like, what do you think of this? Can you just troubleshoot the poker and then boop, get on, fly off and then get on the cruise ship. So I know it sounds like first world problems, but the nice thing about this story is that it takes me back to writing it. And because it's a relatively unique, like, I wouldn't be writing that story again and going to the Galapagos again for the first time. So that's something to treasure about being a writer, is it kind of immortalizes a piece of your life in amber in some ways, even though the story itself had nothing to do with Galapagos.
Now, if that wasn't enough, and you're not accomplished enough, we do have to wait till May 26th if you're going to win this. I think it's going to be a tight race. All the short stories sound great. But I was on your Facebook page, and I saw you won another prestigious award for yet another genre that you like to write. You also venture into YA. So could you tell us about that and the award? Is I pronouncing right? BIPOC?
Yes. So the International Thriller Writers, or ITW, also on Facebook and other sites, want to encourage more Black, Indigenous, people of color writers. Because as you probably know, just we're not encouraged to write, we don't get published. Like there's a lot of racism in society, including publishing, which it tends to be, what's the word? Anyway, just kind of safeguarded by the people who already have power. So to change this, one of the things that ITW did was they sponsored this award. So every year they have Thriller Fest, which is their main festival, and it's pretty expensive to go. You know, it's, I would say,
Coming up.
yeah, I would say it's cost probably like $1,000 if you're trying to do the whole thing, American, and then you can do like 2 days or something if you want to try and save money. But they had this scholarship where they said, hey, I want you to write a middle grade crime novel. Has to be written by a BIPOC person and have a BIPOC character in it, like our star. And we will give you free tuition to Thriller Fest and a $1,000 American stipend. So I was like, you know, I'm supposed to be going to another conference, the Canadian Women in Medicine Conference, which I love very much, and I have gone every single year. And I had some other things planned, like I was doing a speakeasy with my friend, the gin ecologist, Natalie Gamache, who had made, who had distilled a gin in honor of Hope Sze, White Lightning. It's the same name as the latest Hope Sze thriller. So we're going to have a speakeasy for that. And the Playwrights Guild of Canada had sponsored a reading for me at Carr House for Emily Carr. So I was just like, oh yeah, I'm all set. It's at the exact same time, but the chances of me winning are so low. It's like insignificant. It doesn't even matter. I'll just do both. And then when I lose, I'll just go to Victoria and have a good time. Well, as it turned out, I got this email and I was just like, oh my God, I don't want to let down my friends. Like, what am I going to do? But when I talked to them, they were just universally like, you have to do this. Just go. Don't even think about it. Just go.
As good as your friends, because I would give you the same advice.
Of course, I know they're still my friends. They're still, but which brings us back to the first point, which is this: like I meet such amazing people who are really selfless, and I love them. Yeah, I saw my Facebook. I'm like, I just love you. I love my friends, because it can be like everybody talks about how lonely writing is, and because you tend to be by yourself in somewhere, just toiling away on your manuscript. And also, when you have a few success stories, not everybody's happy for you necessarily. But I'm fortunate that I have found some people who are really happy for me. So I recommend that everybody find their crew. And also, if you're like me, like just sort of public service announcements, I had a lot of trouble with it. Like, I think they, you know, when they've researched it, it's like a scarcity mindset. So that's how I was raised. Like, just be like, there's not enough. There's not enough. And of course, in publishing, it's always like that. They only have so many spots. There's only so big a budget. There are only so many spots for the Crime Writers of Canada Award of Excellence. And it's always like you don't want them to get it because you want to get it, and so on. But like in the end, you realize that publishing is like that books are really like a family. And sometimes, you know, your one friend does better, sometimes another friend does better, but in the end, you kind of all try and rise together. And it's the most gratifying thing that you can just be happy for each other and help each other along.
Definitely, yes, and I believe that's the spirit of Crime Writers of Canada too. We actually, not myself, but I know other members are also going to Thriller Fest, trying to set up some meet and greets, so maybe you can meet some other Canadian crime writers there, and you know, enlarge in your community. So
I have actually heard that there's like sort of a Canadian connection, and I should try and get in on it, but I'm not sure how. So please contact me if you are part of the Canadian Mafia.
I'm actually setting up Facebook events this week, so you'll see them there.
Oh, you mean for Thriller Fest or for?
Yeah,
really?
for Thriller Fest. Yeah. There's
Oh,
a
okay.
contingent coming down so you'll be able to meet them there.
Yes. Okay. Awesome.
Before that, though, I believe you're also on the Maple Leaf Crime conference coming up at the end of May. So, last question: what could you tell us about?
So it's being created by Hyacinth Miller, who is who will be the chair of Crime Writers of Canada next year. And we actually had a group meeting yesterday to introduce ourselves and look over the questions. And I knew Madonna Scaff before, but otherwise I hadn't met the other authors. And it was interesting to just meet everybody and to talk. And then, for example, I didn't know that Hyacinth was part of the police force, and that, you know, and she and I had similar tales of racism. I would say, you know, we were the obvious people of color in that group. But you know, there are LGBTQ people who are there. There's someone who talks about more what it's like to live with multiple sclerosis, and also about writing. You know, in the end, it's really about writing and good books. So I think that people who, like, we ran out of time. The free Zoom meeting ran out and cut us off. So I hope that people will come and really see what it's like to give space for new voices in Canadian crime.
Sounds great. I'll be working that too, so I'll see you there.
So in other words, you do everything. I'm glad that I met you, because now I have an in.
Great. Very happy to have met you too, Melissa. I promised to keep it under 15 minutes and we failed that, but it happens sometimes. So thank you very much for doing this interview with us. And, we'll see you later, and thank you for everyone.